Well, it's been a little while since I've done one of these midweek devotions, and it's good to be back. Actually, I'm happy to be back sharing again. Today, I'd like to tell you about a movie that I saw last night. Watched it with Noah and with Kyung-Soo, and it's The Lost Boys. It's this cheesy vampire comedy from I think it was 1987, like right in the height of the 80s, right? And it had a very young Kiefer Sutherland in it, and the two Coreys, and there's that great saxophone blast on the beach thing, that Tim Capella song, and the creepy singing children's choir, right? The haunting kind of theme of the movie. But anyway, so it was a lot of fun, and it's a vampire movie. So in the course of the movie, the younger characters, they're convinced that there's a vampire problem, and they think that they know who the head vampire is, and that head vampire just happens to be dating the one kid's mother. So when he comes over for dinner, they decide they're going to do all these tests on him, and they're going to see if he's the vampire or not. So they make him eat garlic, and they splash holy water on him, and they hold a mirror up in his face and see if he shows his reflection. And all of these tests failed. None of them revealed him as being the head vampire, which in fact he was. Hopefully I'm not spoiling the movie. I mean, it is 33 years old, but anyway, none of these things worked. And Kyung-Soo asked me afterwards, she said, well, why didn't any of these things work? Because he's a vampire. And the answer is because he was invited in. He was invited in to dinner by the eldest son, and of course invited by the mother as well. Now, this is an odd thing because when we invite a vampire in, we empower them and we disempower ourselves. And this is kind of unique among vampires. We don't see this with any other kind of monsters, with werewolves or zombies or anything like that. But with vampires, there's this issue of invitation, and it seems to be important. So what difference does it make when we invite them in or not? Like, why should that empower them? Why should that matter? And I guess that brings us to the question, is there actually a difference then between an invited guest and a thief? And the short answer is, well, yeah, because you can most certainly call the police on a thief. It's a little harder to do when it's a guest that you've invited in. So I don't know if you've ever had a house guest that wouldn't leave. I know when I was younger, I had a few parties where there were a few folks that it was hard to get them to get out the door. Or maybe we have that problem at Christmas when you invite family and they're around a few days later and you're not quite sure why. I heard a phrase once that in-laws are like they're like fish, that they basically have like a 2-day expiry. But anyway, so when we do invite people into our homes, it's a lot harder to get them out than if we haven't. And when we turn to the Bible, we see that King Ahaz of Judah, he also had that problem. He was facing war with the northern kingdom of Israel, and I think I don't want to name the other country because I may get it wrong. But anyway, instead of turning to God and saying, God, help me, please, he sent messengers to the king of Assyria. And these messengers were carrying a bunch of gold and silver from God's temple. And so these messengers went with this plea for the Assyrian king to come and save King Ahaz of Judah from this invading force. And so the Assyrian king, he listened. He looked at the gold, looked at the silver, and said, yeah, that sounds like a good deal. So he came, he marched against Damascus and saved Judah, but then settled in and decided that he kind of quite liked that area and didn't really want to leave. And at that point, Judah became a vassal state of Assyria. So they essentially had to continue paying tribute to these more powerful armies. And as we follow this down through time, King Ahaz's son Hezekiah, of course, he inherits this situation from his father, and the Assyrians are kind of a constant thorn in his side. But finally, he himself and the nation of Israel, or the nation of Judah, the Israelites, they turned back toward God. And God finally got rid of that Assyrian threat for them. So they were living free and clear, and it was feeling pretty good. But no sooner had that happened than the Babylonians, they sent some dignitaries, some emissaries to Judah, just to basically go and say hi and see how things are going. And while they got there, King Hezekiah, he took them in and he showed them all around. He showed them like all the palace and the storehouse and the temple and all the good stuff. He was showing off of what a rich nation they had become. So later on, Isaiah was in talking with King Hezekiah, and he's like, "So what was the deal with those guys? What'd you do with them? What did they see?" And Hezekiah said, "Oh, they saw everything. I showed them all the treasures. I showed them everything." And basically, Isaiah says, "You fool! Like all that stuff is as good as gone already, right? You just gave away the kingdom." And it wasn't too long later that the Babylonian army came back and actually did end up taking everything. So what we learn from this is that we have to be careful when we invite powerful people into our innermost places. And that kind of makes me wonder why I've not really understood why people want to play with Ouija boards. Because either the whole thing is a hoax, and in which case there's no point in playing because it's just pointless, it's just nothing. But if you do actually believe that on the Ouija board you're summoning up a supernatural spirit, this powerful being, what makes you think that it would actually listen to you and that you could control it? It makes no sense. So if you actually believe that there are these powerful spiritual beings out here that can do all kinds of wonderful magic, I think the last thing that you'd want to do is actually purposefully summon one into your home, because then they're there, and what are you going to do, right? You're basically in big trouble. So the whole idea is crazy. But the point is this, of all this rambling and such, is that we should be mindful of who and what we invite into our homes and into our lives, because those things that we invite in, they're going to take up residence, and when they do, we're going to find that we're quite powerless to get rid of them again. It's very, very hard to banish them and exorcise them back out. Now, this doesn't just apply to rich kings or vampires or even in-laws. Think about all the things that we habitually welcome into our homes and welcome into our lives. So think about the kinds of food that we buy and that we bring into our homes and consume, and what that does to our bodies. Do we drink? How much and how often? What plays on our TVs and what kind of images fill the screens of our computers? What kind of language do we use in our homes? You see, we have control over all of these things. These are all things that we willingly invite, things that we bring into our homes intentionally. And it's certainly true that the world is a tough place. There are going to be bad things that befall us. There's going to be tyrants, there'll be famines, there's going to be disasters of all kinds that are going to fall upon us. There's going to be storms in our lives. But although tragic things are going to happen, for goodness sakes, let's not intentionally invite calamity into our homes and into our lives. That's a fool's game, because once we invite calamity in, we grant it license, we grant it authority to remain within our homes. And we find that, like with the vampires, that we become powerless in the face of them. And ultimately, we will have nobody to blame but ourselves. Now, there's a line from Psalm 105 as part of this Sunday's lectionary. And it's written originally about Joseph serving under Pharaoh. But I think it applies equally well to us. It says, Pharaoh made Joseph the lord of his house and the ruler of his possessions. And that same authority is granted to each one of us, that we ourselves, we're lords of our houses. We are rulers of all of our possessions. We're in control. So for goodness sakes, don't open the door to calamity and chaos and invite them in. Don't invite evil to come in and sit down in your house. Not even for a moment, because life is already too hard. So at the very least, let's leave the vampires outside.